Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth Near Peer Career Panel of 2022. I'm Mike Cohen, a partnership manager for the New York Harbor School. Today's panel focuses on Harbor School's Marine Affairs, Policy, and Advocacy CTE program. This panel is brought to you by the Oyster Project and funded by the National Science Foundation and the John K. and Elizabeth W. Knorr Charitable Foundation. Please watch the chat for a link and participate in the National Science Foundation survey. I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Jaden, for introductions and for our panel discussion. Please drop any questions you have into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll ask some of them at the end. So take it away, Jaden. Jaden, can you unmute, turn your video on? Okay, while Jaden works out technical issues, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. As I do, I'm going to ask each of you to turn on your video and unmute yourself and give about a 2-minute introduction of yourself. First of all, oh, here's Jaden. All right, unmute Jaden and go ahead and introduce Taehong.
Hello, everybody. Our first panelist on the marine policy panel will be Taehong Park. Take it away. I think you have to unmute here.
And unmuting would actually help in this respect. Beautiful weather today after all that rain. So that's a great way to have a nice session today. I'm a professor over at NYU, New York University. I've been teaching there since 2012, and I'm in the music department in 2 programs, showing appointment in composition and music theory, and also in music technology. And perhaps I'll give you a short sort of background as to how I got here to put things into context. I do remember when I was in 9th grade and 8th grade and best times of my life. Early on when I was a little kid, I think I wanted to be a construction worker. So, but I still build and compose and create things. I think that still has remained with me. I would say art and English were my 2 favorite subjects. And I was actually going to a German school in Greece at that time, grade 1 through 5. And then in 11th grade, this was in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, when I was going to a British school back then. They needed a bassist, a bass player. So I said, okay, I'll play bass. And 4 strings only, how difficult can it be? And boy, was I wrong. And I got into playing bass and got into music. And in 12th grade, I was very interested in learning how to code and creating things. Again, that mentality of being a construction worker, dream type situation, sort of expanding to more interesting things in some ways. So that also led me to college, and I did an electrical computer science degree, which was pretty interesting, 4 years in college. And in 1992, while I was a student during the day, basically, and a musician by night, there was this thing called, basically it's like American Idol, the Korean version. So in 1992, I was one of the finalists, and that's where I actually met my wife. We didn't actually make it to the very last phase of the competition, but that was an interesting experience. Thereafter, I worked in industry as a research engineer. So by day, I was a geek. By night, I was a musician. Then I started to integrate both and came to the US to do my master's at Dartmouth College and my PhD at Princeton. That was in 2004. Then that led me to Tulane University in New Orleans, the Big Easy, where I taught in the music department. And recently in 2012, I came from the Big Easy to the Big Apple to New York City, and have been a professor here since 2012, and came with Hurricane Sandy. And I'm sure that you guys at Governor's Island have experienced that. that hurricane firsthand. My main focus these days, as far as interest and research is concerned,
Super.
what I
Uh,
call soundscapes
I hit
and
the pitch
cloud
well, but
maps.
you have to, I think you have to go on to the next.
Oh, we have to move on. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll finish it off, and we'll talk more about what soundscapes are. So, thank you.
Our next panelist is Anita Chan, one of the other industry professionals.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anita. So when I was around your age, I stumbled into environmental science major in my high school, and I also interned at a urban farm. So that is what really got me into working with the environment. And since then, I've gone through college, majoring in business administration management. And then after that, I've worked several years in urban agriculture, waste management, park conservation, and environmental education. So I actually didn't go through the whole way, just like 100% sure this is exactly what I want to do. But I always found myself going back to doing something outdoors, something for environment, something for the community. And the jobs that I end up doing, I worked with East New York Farms Project. I worked with the Student Conservation Association. And most recently, I worked with Earth Matter New York, which is located on the same island as your school. So yeah, like lots of fun stuff, lots of very interesting things. And it really spoke to me because it's something that we all can take part in, and also it affects every single one of us, no matter who we are, where we live, and what we do. So I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And for our Harvard School alumni, we have Elaine Martinez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jaden. I am a New York Harvard School alumni. I was part of the Marine Policy and Advocacy program, which is now called, let's see, because I can't remember it from the top of my head, Marine Affairs, Policy and Advocacy. I am 19 years old. I'm going to turn 20 this year. I am a student at Borough Manhattan Community College. I'm also a staff member. I'm super excited to be part of this panel and super excited to hear what fellow students of my prior class has to say about this program and how much it has changed. So I'm very excited to be part of such a panel.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. And for our current Harvard School students, we have Lena L. and Leanna Martin Peterson.
Hi. My name's Liana. I'm an 11th grade student in marine policy and marine policy advocacy affairs, but I've always had a love for sustainability and the environment, so I'm really glad to be in the CTE.
I'm Lena. I'm in the 10th grade Marine Affairs and Policy and Advocacy program, and I guess I could say the same thing.
And today we're also joined by the Marine Affairs instructor, Rob Markuski.
Hey, everybody. My name is Robert Markuski. I am the Marine Affairs Policy and Advocacy instructor. Little bit of background about me. I grew up on Long Island. After college, I went to college. After high school, I went to college for 2 years. Took some time off. Started working for an environmental advocacy groups in my 20s while taking time off from college. That inspired me to go back and finish my degree and get a teaching certificate and teach history. And over the years, last 10 years of teaching, I've been in the process of developing this program. So it's really great to be on this panel myself. It's really great to be on the panel with all these people here, particularly the students, right? Jaden is one of my students moderating the event. Nina and Liana are current students, and Elaine was actually part of the inaugural class, the first class ever to take this program. So a lot has changed, both for myself and for this program. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say and explain it all to the folks in the audience.
Thank you, thank you. And now we'll have panelists go over briefly go over their field of study and what they do in their experience. I would like to ask Taeyang to please come forward.
What's the question?
Just in like 1 or 2 minutes, try to go over your field of study and what you've been doing with relation.
Right. Oh, great. So that's the second part of what I was going to talk about. So this is really a nice segue to that. So we've been working, me and my student, NYU student, has been working with Robert Markuski's class at Harbor School in trying to look at noise pollution on Governor's Island, but also Manhattan in general, and noise pollution in big cities in general. And what we've been sort of trying to determine is using techniques, scientific techniques, engineering techniques, as a way to see and hear and visualize and measure what sort of noise and how much noise, how loud the noise is, especially pertinent to chopper noise and airplane noise. So we've been studying and introducing recording techniques, measurement techniques, visualization techniques, and we're now getting more into installing sensor networks to do this automatically. This idea of a data-driven approach, data-driven storytelling. So this idea that you can't fix what you can't measure, and embracing that as a way to engage in research or in practice what you study in school, and sort of integrate everything in order to determine what is going on in terms of soundscapes and sound maps and the noise pollution, especially at places like Governor's Island. There's lots of chopper noise, especially when the weather gets nicer, and students have been involved in this, and that's been sort of my interest and my collaboration with Jaden and Robert and the other class participants.
Thank you, Mr. Park. I would like to ask all panelists to turn on their cameras for our panel discussion. So, Rob, for Rob and his students, what would be your definition of marine affairs policy and advocacy?
Okay, so I'll start off. So if I sound like I'm complicating things, that's because it is complicated. So I'll start there. To define that is very complicated because we live in a very complex world. So what marine affairs and policy and advocacy is a way of studying our culture, our environment, our economic systems, and understanding how they all are integrated, and they're all affected by decisions we make, both for better or worse, for the environment, for our culture, for economic situations, right? So it's really looking at how we function as a society as a whole, and understanding how we interact with our resources, right? And because we're a maritime marine school, we focus on marine resources, of course. So just to clarify it, right, marine affairs policy and advocacy is sort of understanding why we have certain problems in our society, where they are rooted from, and then understanding how stakeholders, which are just people within the realm, and that extends to organizations, institutions, and companies, and how they all kind of play a role in the way things function in our society. Moreover, with the advocacy piece and the policy piece, try to come up with solutions to these complex problems, right? And maybe on a more ideal level, try to implement these solutions, right? So that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Rob. And for the professionals in the industry, Tehan and Anita Chen, this seems like a large, regarding to your field, it seems like a large field of study. What types of jobs can one pursue out of foreign policy?
Anita?
Okay, sure. I'll jump in first. Yes, it is definitely a really large field of study, and you can go many ways. I like to encourage students to really think about like whether they're more into like hands-on work, or they more interested in research. Do they love talking to people? So just kind of like few things that I can kind of think of, which is really already reflected in the many CTEs in the school, are like, hey, do you like diving? Do you like being right next to all the different marine life? Then that is one field you can go in. You can be a research scientist, whether or not you want to research different species, or you want to research materials that humans use that affect marine life. That's another thing. You can do something along my lines in terms of waste management, because as long as we're consuming, there is waste, and how you manage it really affects people, affects animals, and also the environment that in which we all live in. You can be an environmental educator, because we will always need to further our knowledge and pass on our knowledge to future generations. You can work with the EPA and national parks. So there are many, many different ways to go about it. So I just really want to put out there that I absolutely love schools that have CTEs or just like majors, because it really allows students to step in and really see for themselves what this can all mean for them in the future.
I see Rob raised his hand.
Yes, yeah, I am raising my hand. I just wanted to add one thing to help facilitate the discussion that I might have missed in my description of marine affairs, policy, and advocacy. Why I love it is because it's a multidisciplinary and an interdisciplinary course, right? So when you hear the panelists speak about their interests and their skills or what they're doing with their life, they're all kind of can be marine affairs professionals, right? So it's within that, there's a lot of different pathways, right? So, this is kind of all under the umbrella of environmental affairs and our environment and sustainability. So you'll see like a lot of different pathways. So just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add something to that comment, which is that I think a lot of the stuff that you learn and the approach in learning, I think, can be applied to many different areas, and something that's completely, you might maybe even think is very distant to what you're doing right now, right? I'm doing music, but also do computer science and electrical engineering and all this other stuff that I'm doing with Robert and Robert's class. So I think some of the fundamentals that you learn in high school can really inform your future pathway, and you can sort of tap into that experience to go into different areas, including academia or industry or even art, right? So the stuff that you see in the background is actually arts that's driven via noise pollution sensors. So there's many, many different pathways, and I think the limits are basically your imagination.
Thank you. And now for our alumni, Mr. Lane. What aspect of marine affairs or policy are you currently pursuing, if any, at school or work?
Thank you, Jaden. Well, to be honest, I am not really necessarily studying anything maritime related or really necessarily political or policy related. I'm more in business management, hospitality, but like Rob said, it's something that really is really for everything. Like policy falls into so many aspects of each career, maritime related as well, environmental. I'm more in hospitality to be a flight attendant. So aviation, because I want to be a flight attendant. So it's mostly aviation, but hospitality goes with anything, restaurants, transportation, like cruises, which involves the environment. So I think for sure, even though I'm not necessarily studying maritime, it for sure has a lot of things to do with, well, it definitely involves a lot of policy with the hospitality management program or major that I'm studying. So, for students who are in marine policy or marine policy, they definitely can implement what they're studying now in high school to what they want to do in college or wherever they choose to study. Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that question.
Yeah, it's open, to anybody within the policy world. Like, how has it affected, your personal life or life within work?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. So, yeah, Elaine, it brings up a great point. Myself, like I majored in environmental science in high school, but when I got to college, I was like, I don't know if that's for me. So I kind of like steered a different direction. But then I came back, and that really goes to show like why it's never a bad thing to learn more, right? So for Elaine in the future, like as a flight attendant, you would be the person equipped to help the airline transition to a more greener infrastructure, right? Because currently, if no one at an airline has any idea on how anything affects the environment poorly, then if there's a law that comes out, how would they really adhere to it and transition? So that is like why it really is super important for really everyone to get some sort of like basic knowledge about this. And yeah, you all, like, I think everyone will kind of find their way into how to incorporate some of this knowledge in their personal lives, in their future careers, where it isn't as obvious as an environmental field, but it's still totally relevant.
Yeah, that's a great point that Anita is making, also Elaine, where it seems that what she is currently interested in might be so distant from what you've been doing. But no, I mean, if you look at what I'm doing, which is aircraft noise pollution, it completely sort of inadvertently, we are basically in a similar field, and having that knowledge, I think from Elaine, it would be great to also educate the folks in the airline industry that we can do better. Like, the idea is not to get rid of this or that. It's we can do better, and how can we do this better? And I think all of us can contribute to that as a sort of. It takes a village, right? It takes the community. It takes everyone to sort of chime in a little bit and contribute, and then move the needle a little bit. And even if a tiny bit, that's an improvement. That's I think why we're here.
Too, I'd like to chime in. Yeah, I tell, and I think there's a question for the current students after. I think about, that question that was posed, right? Are you pursue, like, seems like a large field of study, what types of jobs can you pursue? I mean, I started out wanting to be a politician, and I ended up being a teacher of environmental policy, right? So it's like when I was 19 or 20, I was like, I want to be a politician, right? And then I decided to go a different route, become a teacher. But if I look at my life now, I'm kind of involved in a lot of community organizing and community activity and community activism and environmental advocacy. So it's kind of like it took me 20 years to go through my life to end up doing what I originally wanted to do like 20 years ago. And I think, there's a broad range of skills, but like Anita said, right, like having this like background knowledge of like sustainability and the environment, environmental studies, right? No matter what job you go into, like you kind of have a skill that many may not have at the moment, right? So,
Thank you so much. And for our current students, have you decided yet on what path you would like to take when you graduate from Harvard School?
At the moment, I want to be an environmental lawyer, which basically lets me put stuff that I learned in policy and stuff that I like to do together. I like to talk a lot, so I really like the policy course because I feel like I get to do things that I like to do and connect them back to class. And so I can, like, for example, we go on like lots of trips. I get to meet a bunch of different people, and communicating and talking to these people really helped me tie it back to what I'm learning in class and help me like use that to my advantage. I feel like I could like the best thing about policy for me, in my opinion, is that I get to incorporate my own interests and connect them to the class. And so for career-wise, I feel like I get to do everything to like kind of shape my career, because I could do a little bit of everything and have knowledge that's going to back me up in whatever career I choose to pursue.
For me, I'm not really sure what I want to do career-wise, but I know that I want to stay in like marine affairs because it is something that grew on me. So
Thank you. And for the professionals, has the pandemic, due to COVID-19 affected your industries? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think I can maybe contribute to that question. It's been an unusual situation for everyone, unprecedented in many ways. But I always think that when these situations present themselves, then we become very creative, right? Necessity is the mother of all inventions. The Zoom session we're doing right now, this is very unusual if you sort of rewind 2-3 years before the pandemic. This wasn't a thing. So I think when these types of unfortunate situations happen, then I think we can get creative. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. It is, but I think we can sort of turn that negative into a positive. And although it has affected learning and teaching in my industry, I think we've also found ways where we can do things remotely, which also addresses cost factors and remote learning and all that sort of modality. So I think it's been quite interesting how more quickly the learning experience has become like a hybrid model of virtual plus in person. And I think that's what the future will be.
For me, for my industry, I think the pandemic really opened our eyes to a lot of faulty systems, right? Especially in urban settings, such as New York City, very dense here. We saw that so many people lacked access to outdoors, how like the food systems were just like not enough. And I don't know if some of you have seen the news like earlier in pandemic where like so much milk had to be like just poured out. No, it didn't go to people to drink. It was just wasted because there wasn't a proper like logistical channels to get the milk to where it needs to be. And it really highlights how important it is to have more local food systems, right? We're quite lucky we get to eat food from halfway across the world, but if any part of like the route gets a little problem, then it just gets wasted because it doesn't stop, like people don't stop producing like quickly enough if they realize that, like, it wouldn't be shipped to where it needs to be. So yeah, and also because like everybody was just dying to get some fresh air, people really saw the value of green spaces. Still very limited amount, unfortunately, in New York City. Certain neighborhoods have it better than others, but some neighbors, they have to go a few miles away to find a very nice park to spend time. So at Earth Matter New York, we saw a lot of people really like wanting to come out to grow food, to just even like sit near some plants during the pandemic. And we're very fortunate that because we're an outdoor space, that it was safe enough to do so. And that also caused an influx of people who wanted to learn more about how to compost, how to use the compost on their plants, how to grow their own food. So very devastating realities that surfaced, but also some good things came out of it, because I think like a lot more people came to realize how much they wanted some environmental education.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder to everybody in the, everybody watching, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section. We sure will try our best to answer your questions. And for any of the panelists, what steps are being taken to make marine affairs policy and advocacy more diverse as an industry? And how can we help?
Yeah, I guess I could try to answer that, like being probably the least diverse person in the room, right? So it is an interesting. So I guess I would say is, and this kind of feeds into the question that was just being answered. Then I would love to hear what the current students and the industry partners have to say about that. To go on with what Taeyang had said about COVID and the industry, I, of course, the last 3 years, right? Like Elaine, I didn't get to see her, like her graduation was virtual, right? That was the year the pandemic occurred when she was graduating. So like we were cut short, right? But over the sort of course of the whole entire pandemic, it gave me a lot of like creativity time to sort of work with people, like, right, like Taeyang just said, right? Like this Zoom wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. Him and I probably wouldn't have met because we met over Zoom, right? So like there was a silver lining to it all, and how it affected my teaching career and this program is it sort of like kind of really, it was like a breath, it like took a breath for a minute and then kind of grew into what it should be. So I think although when we like what was said by the other panelists, right, when we have these situations that are catastrophic, right, if you could manage to sort of work your way through it emotionally and physically and get through it, there is a sort of breath of creativity and sort of avenue of like growth that can happen. And for me, for this program, it did do that. So that goes into sort of the making it more diverse is, over the course of the pandemic, I learned a lot about intersectionality, right? And you can't really, like, if you hear all the panelists speak, particularly Taeyang and Anita, right, the professionals, you can't talk about the environment unless you talk about, right, economics, right? You can't talk about economics unless you talk about culture. You can't talk about culture unless you talk about everybody's social lives, right? So all of these things are interconnected. So I think, what I'm trying to do is I use that as a lens to teach, which is sort of creates this inclusivity and expansion of the program to broader perspectives.
Like what Rob said, I would probably describe the it already as diverse, because I feel like we connect like everything into our studies. Like we connect. So one, we deal with a bunch of like different things, like the sectors that we study about are all different things. So I feel like there's a diversity in like opportunities and options and the things that we learn about. And we also integrate like discussions about race and like political things into class already. So if it was my opinion, I would probably already describe the class as like diverse in the way that we talk about things.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both for your answers. And kind of to wrap, things up here, I'd like to ask for anyone, but specifically students and alumni, what is one piece of practical advice you can give to students interested in going into this field?
I guess I'll go first. First of all, I was someone who transferred to New York Harbor School, so I don't know if there's any transfers as ninth graders now, but I transferred to New York Harbor School. Sorry, I have like a sore throat right now. I transferred to New York Harbor School, and I was essentially didn't have the option of picking what CTE I wanted to do, but I'm actually very glad I chose, well, I didn't get to choose, but I'm very glad I got to be put into the CTE because of what I learned. And you can take so much from this program that I, not to throw any CTEs under the bus, because I feel like every CTE has its benefits, but this program for sure really goes into every field you do because it revolves around people, policies, and you see it all the time. You see it all the time, I'm sorry. You see it all the time with a lot of different things. And like our student said, it's such a diverse program, and you're gonna feel very included with what you learn and who you're around. I believe my last year, I think the year before my graduation, I was, my class went to the United Nations, and we went for climate change. And there were just so many people from around the world who came to really learn what it meant to be part of something that was so important to not only just this program, not only to just these students, but to everyone who lives in this world, because it's something that we can expand from one thing to another. Taeyong is a music professor, and he is part of this field. So I really think if you get involved with this program, you're gonna be really set for so many other things that you have coming in the future. I mean, I only graduated 2 years ago, and I already see so many things that I did with Rob in that course, in that program, that has really benefited what I what I do now as a business management major, as a staff member at a college. And it's something that I'm very proud to have as something that I did as a high school student. If anyone wants to take it over.
I see a question in the chat about what types of projects, internships have students done. I'm going to talk, fairly recently, we got to go on a trip to a marine biology lab in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And that we both went on that one. But I've also done like last year when it was Zoom. I remember there was a question about like how the pandemic affected you, and the pandemic gave me, for this class in particular, gave me a lot of opportunities because I kind of got to be exposed to many different programs. And like I think I did a few internships. One of the internships that I did was at the climate museum, and it was nice that I got to do that because I probably wouldn't be able to do that if we were in school, because I have other things that I do during school, so I probably wouldn't be able to do things like that. But I did an internship with the climate museum and an internship with Lamont over the summer. And then right now I'm doing an internship with Earth Matter. But I think that policy gives a lot of exposure to different types of programs and different projects. So that's what I really like about policy.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add one last thing? It's really quick. This is something that Rob always told our class, that if you're a part of this program, we're kind of like the umbrella of all CTEs. We really are like we advocate for each other CTE that are part of our school, New York Harbor School. So always keep that in mind if you want to join the program or be part of it.
Thanks,
Thank you
Elaine.
so much, everybody, for coming out and joining us for this panel. Unfortunately, this is our time. I'd like to dismiss everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jaden. Just real quick, I just want to thank Jaden. I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Helene, for running the tech behind the scenes. And thanks to the National Science Foundation and the John K. and Elizabeth W. Noor Charitable Foundation for funding these panels. Please take a few minutes to complete the NSF survey that Helene's dropping into the chat. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you in 3 weeks for our next panel focused on marine biology research. And have a great weekend.